My name's Sarah, and I'm 34 years old. Christmas dinner at my family's house was supposed to be perfect. You know, the kind where everyone argues about politics but still passes the mashed potatoes with love. But last Christmas, my Aunt Victoria slipped me a single photograph under the table. And within 30 minutes, I had 3 police cars in our driveway, and my entire world turned upside down. Let me take you back to the beginning, to when everything still made sense. Christmas had always been our family's sacred tradition, and I mean sacred in every sense of the word. Growing up in the small town of Clearwater Falls, Oregon, our family Christmas was the stuff of Hallmark movies, or at least that's what I used to tell myself. Every December 24th, without fail, we'd all converge on my grandmother's sprawling farmhouse on Maple Ridge Road. The house itself was a work of art, built in 1897 by my great-great-grandfather Henrik Nordström, a Norwegian immigrant who'd struck it rich in the timber business. 3 stories of weathered cedar siding, wraparound porches on 2 levels, and windows so tall you could practically walk through them. The preparation would start weeks ahead. My grandmother, Elena, would begin her famous lefse making in early December, rolling out thin potato flatbreads on her ancient wooden board that had somehow survived the journey from Bergen over a century ago. The whole house would smell like butter and cardamom for days. My mother, Rebecca, would coordinate the menu with military precision. She had spreadsheets, people. Actual spreadsheets with cooking times and oven rotations mapped out to the minute. My father, Thomas, would spend December weekends stringing lights on everything that didn't move. The wraparound porch, the old oak tree, the barn, even the mailbox got the treatment. He'd stand on that rickety ladder that was probably older than I was, my mother shouting warnings from below, while my younger sister Emma and I would place bets on whether this would be the year he finally fell off. He never did, though I'm convinced it was pure stubbornness keeping him upright rather than any actual balance. The guest list was always the same. Immediate family plus the extended clan. My Aunt Victoria and her husband, Uncle David, would drive up from Sacramento with their twin boys, 8-year-old Caleb and Connor, who were absolute tornadoes of energy and mischief. My cousin Jake, Aunt Victoria's eldest from her first marriage, would fly in from Seattle where he worked as a software engineer. Jake was 28, perpetually single, and had this endearing habit of showing up to family dinners in expensive clothes that he would immediately ruin with cranberry sauce or gravy, without fail, every single year. Then there was my Uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother, who lived just 2 towns over in Millfield with his wife Patricia and their daughter Lily. Lily was 16 and going through what my mother diplomatically called her artistic phase, which mostly involved black clothing, dramatic poetry, and an alarming number of silver rings on every finger. But she made the most beautiful sketches of the farmhouse during Christmas, capturing details that even I'd never noticed, despite spending every holiday there for 34 years. The dynamics were always interesting. Uncle Robert was the family's success story. He'd built a construction company from nothing and now employed half the county. He was generous to a fault, always picking up dinner tabs and slipping 20s to the younger cousins when their parents weren't looking. But he had this way of making everything a competition, even Christmas morning gift exchanges. Uncle David, on the other hand, was the quiet one. A high school history teacher with a gentle demeanor and an encyclopedic knowledge of Civil War battles. The kids adored him because he'd turn historical events into these elaborate stories with sound effects and dramatic gestures. Aunt Victoria was the family organizer, the one who remembered everyone's birthdays and coordinated group gifts for the grandparents. She taught 3rd grade at Clearwater Elementary and had that teacher superpower of managing chaos while maintaining perfect calm. Patricia was newer to the family. She and Uncle Robert had only been married 5 years, but she'd thrown herself into our traditions with enthusiasm that sometimes bordered on aggressive cheerfulness. The Christmas Eve routine was sacred and unbreakable. We'd arrive around 4 in the afternoon, and the kids would immediately disappear to explore the property. There were barns to investigate, a creek to skip stones in, even frozen, and that massive oak tree with rope swings that had entertained 4 generations of Nordstrom children. The adults would gather in the kitchen, ostensibly to help with dinner preparations, but really to catch up on the year's gossip while sneaking tastes of everything. Grandma Elena would hold court at the kitchen island, her silver hair pinned in a perfect bun, orchestrating the meal preparation like a conductor leading a symphony. At 86, she was still sharp as a tack and had opinions about everything from politics to the proper way to fold napkins. She'd immigrated from Norway as a young bride in 1958, and her accent had softened over the decades but never disappeared entirely. When she got excited or frustrated, Norwegian phrases would slip out, leaving us grandchildren to guess what she just called us. The dining room could seat 16 people around the antique mahogany table that Grandpa Gustav had built by hand in 1962. It was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, with intricate carved legs and a finish so deep you could see your reflection in it. Grandma would bring out the good china, delicate pieces with tiny blue flowers that we were absolutely forbidden to touch as children, and the crystal glasses that caught the candlelight like tiny prisms.
Dinner was always at 6 sharp. Not 5:59, not 6:01. Grandma Helena did not tolerate tardiness. Dad would carve the turkey with the same ceremony every year, using the bone-handled carving set that had been a wedding gift to my grandparents. He'd tell the same stories about learning to carve from his father, about the year he accidentally carved off his thumbnail along with the breast meat, about the Christmas when the cat knocked the entire turkey off the counter 20 minutes before dinner. The food was legendary. Mom's honey-glazed ham with the pineapple rings and maraschino cherries that turned it into something that belonged in a magazine. Aunt Patricia's stuffing, which had some secret ingredient she refused to reveal. I suspected fennel, but she'd never confirm. Uncle Robert's mashed potatoes whipped to impossible fluffiness and loaded with enough butter to stop a heart. Grandma's green bean casserole, which sounds pedestrian but was actually a work of art involving fresh beans, homemade cream of mushroom soup, and caramelized onions that took her half a day to prepare. And the desserts. Oh, the desserts. Mom's apple pie with a lattice crust so perfect it looked machine-made. Aunt Victoria's famous chocolate Yule log, which took her 3 days to make and involved more steps than most people's wedding cakes. Grandma's traditional Norwegian cookies. Krumkake rolled into delicate cones. Sandbuckelse that crumbled at the first bite, and those buttery spritz cookies shaped like Christmas trees and stars. But it wasn't just the food that made these dinners magical. It was the stories. Every year, the same stories would emerge as the wine flowed and the evening wore on. Dad would tell us about the Christmas when he and Uncle Robert tried to catch Santa Claus and ended up destroying half the living room with their elaborate trap system. Uncle Robert would counter with the story of the year Dad got his head stuck in the banister spindles and had to be extracted with dish soap and a crowbar. Grandma Elena would regale us with tales of Christmas in Norway, of her childhood in a village so small it didn't even have a name, just a number on the postal route. She'd describe winters so harsh that they'd tunnel through snow to get to the barn, of Christmas traditions that involved hiding brooms from witches and leaving porridge out for barn gnomes. As kids, Emma and I would sit wide-eyed wondering if barn gnomes might visit Oregon farmhouses too. The gift exchange happened after dinner, once the dishes were cleared and the coffee was served. We'd draw names at Thanksgiving with a $20 limit that Uncle Robert consistently ignored, showing up with gifts that clearly cost 10 times that amount. But nobody minded because his generosity came from genuine love, not from any desire to show off. I loved watching the interactions during gift exchange, the way Aunt Victoria would get genuinely emotional over even the smallest thoughtful gesture, how Uncle David would examine every gift with the curiosity of an archaeologist, asking questions about where it came from and how it was made, the way the twins would bounce off the walls with excitement, their identical faces glowing in the tree lights. Lily would usually spend the evening sketching in her little moleskin notebook, capturing moments when she thought nobody was looking. Years later, I'd discover she'd been documenting our family for years, creating this incredible visual history of our Christmas traditions. She'd catch Dad mid-story, his hands animated in the air. She'd sketch Grandma Alina's profile as she watched the children up in their gifts, her expression soft with contentment. She'd draw Uncle David reading to the twins by the fireplace, their small bodies pressed against his sides like puppies seeking warmth. After the gifts, we'd migrate to the living room where a fire would be crackling in the stone fireplace that dominated one wall. Dad and Uncle Robert would invariably fall asleep in the matching recliners, their belt buckles loose in and their hands resting on satisfied stomachs. The women would settle on the sofas with cups of coffee and glasses of Bailey's, voices getting softer and more conspiratorial as the evening wore on. The kids would play board games or work on puzzles, the older ones helping the younger ones without being asked. This was my normal. This was what family looked like to me. Warmth, tradition, predictability, love.
a safe harbor in a world that often felt chaotic and uncertain. When college stress threatened to overwhelm me, I'd close my eyes and picture Christmas at Grandma's house. When my first serious relationship ended badly, I knew Christmas dinner would be there to remind me that some love was unconditional and permanent. When I struggled to find my footing in my career, bouncing between jobs and questioning my choices, Christmas dinner was the constant that told me I belonged somewhere, that I was valued and cherished just for being me. Even as we all grew older and life became more complicated, Christmas dinner remained sacred. Jake got serious with a girlfriend who joined us for 3 years running until they broke up spectacularly the following spring. Emma went through her college rebellion phase, but still showed up every Christmas Eve, even if she spent the first hour sulking about having to leave her friends. I brought home boyfriends over the years, some good, some less so, and the family absorbed them all with characteristic warmth.
The tradition survived Grandpa Bustoff's death when I was in high school. It was our first Christmas without his booming laugh and terrible dad jokes. But Grandma Elena insisted we carry on exactly as we always had. He would haunt this house if we changed even one thing, she declared, and nobody dared to argue with her. So we set a place for him anyway, and Dad told his stories, and somehow it felt like he was still there in the familiar rhythms of the evening. The tradition survived my parents' brief separation when I was 25, a rough patch that had the whole family walking on eggshells for months. But they showed up to Christmas dinner together, sitting in their usual spots, and by the end of the evening, were finishing each other's stories again like nothing had happened. They worked it out that spring, and their marriage came out stronger for the struggle. The tradition survived job losses and health scares and teenage drama and all the ordinary crises that families weather together. It was our anchor, our touchstone, our proof that some things in life could be counted on absolutely. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was to think that love and safety were the same thing. I assumed that because someone carved your turkey and remembered your birthday and hugged you goodnight, they were inherently trustworthy. I believed that family meant protection, that the people who claimed to love you would never deliberately hurt you. I thought I knew everyone around that table as well as I knew myself. I could predict Uncle Robert's jokes and Aunt Victoria's reactions. I knew that Dad would get emotional during the toasts, and Mom would fret about the timing of everything. I knew that Jake would spill something on his shirt, and Lily would roll her eyes at her parents' displays of affection. I especially thought I knew Uncle David. Quiet, gentle Uncle David, who read bedtime stories in different voices and never raised his voice even when the twins were being particularly destructive. Uncle David, who helped me with my history homework throughout high school, who wrote me recommendation letters for college, who remembered every important milestone in my life. Uncle David, who taught me to play chess and listened patiently to my teenage angst and gave me thoughtful books for every birthday. Uncle David, who my 8-year-old cousin called the safest grown-up in the world. I was wrong about so many things back then, but I was especially devastatingly wrong about Uncle David. Because sometimes the people who seem the safest are the most dangerous of all. Sometimes the person who reads you bedtime stories and teaches you to play chess and makes you feel special and understood is also capable of unimaginable betrayal. Sometimes family doesn't mean protection. Sometimes it just means the predator has easier access. But I wouldn't learn any of that until Aunt Victoria slipped me that photograph under the dinner table, and my entire world crumbled in the space between one heartbeat and the next. That was still months away, though. For now, in my memories, Christmas remained perfect, sacred, safe. For now, I could still close my eyes and see that farmhouse glowing with warm light, hear the familiar voices and laughter, smell the honey-glazed ham and pine boughs and wood smoke. I could still remember what it felt like to belong somewhere completely, to be surrounded by people who loved me unconditionally. I didn't know yet that memories could be weapons. I didn't know that everything I cherished about my childhood was about to be revealed as a carefully constructed lie. But I would learn soon enough, because
The thing about family secrets is that they don't stay buried forever. Eventually, someone always finds the photograph that changes everything. The months leading up to that final Christmas were different, though I didn't recognize the signs at the time. Looking back now, with the cruel clarity that hindsight provides, I can see the subtle shifts that should have warned me something was brewing beneath the surface of our perfect family facade. It started in September, when Aunt Victoria began calling me more frequently. Not unusual in itself. We'd always been close, probably because she was only 12 years older than me, and had always felt more like an older sister than an aunt. But these calls had a different quality to them, where our conversations used to flow naturally between topics, job gossip, family updates, recommendations for Netflix shows. Now she seemed to be fishing for something specific. "How are things with you and Uncle David?" she'd ask, her voice carefully casual in that way that immediately puts you on alert. I'd reassure her that everything was fine, that Uncle David was the same wonderful mentor and father figure he had always been, which was true as far as I knew. He'd helped me move into my new apartment in Portland that summer, spending an entire Saturday assembling IKEA furniture and hanging pictures with the patience of a saint. When I'd gotten food poisoning the week before Labor Day weekend, he'd shown up at my door with homemade soup and stayed to make sure I was okay. When my car broke down on Highway 26 in the middle of nowhere, he'd driven 40 miles to pick me up without a single complaint. "He's always been there for me," I'd tell Victoria, and I meant it. I don't know what I'd do without him. There'd be this pause then, the silence that stretched just a beat too long before she'd changed the subject entirely. I started to wonder if maybe she was having marital problems, if perhaps she was projecting some kind of relationship anxiety onto the rest of us. Victoria and David had been married for 15 years, and while they'd always seemed happy enough, I knew that long marriages went through rough patches.
The second sign came in October, when I ran into my childhood friend, Amanda, at the grocery store in Clearwater Falls. I was visiting for the weekend, helping Mom prepare for Dad's surprise birthday party, when I bumped into Amanda in the produce section. We'd been inseparable as kids, but had drifted apart after high school when she stayed local and I moved to Portland for college. "Sarah, oh my God, I haven't seen you in forever," she'd squealed, throwing her arms around me in an enthusiastic hug. We spent a few minutes catching up. She was married now, working as a dental hygienist, had 2 little kids who were apparently as wild as we'd been at their age. But then her expression shifted, became more serious. "Hey, can I ask you something? It might be weird, but has your Uncle David ever made you uncomfortable? Like when you were younger?" The question was so unexpected, so completely out of left field, that I actually laughed. "Uncle David? No, absolutely not. Why would you ask that?" Amanda looked embarrassed, her cheeks flushing pink. "I don't know. It's probably nothing. It's just, do you remember that summer when you were maybe 10 or 11 and I came to your grandma's house for that big barbecue? Your uncle was there, and he was taking pictures of all the kids playing in the sprinkler?" I nodded. I remembered that day vaguely. It had been one of many similar summer gatherings where the adults would sit on the porch drinking beer while the kids ran wild in the yard. He kept asking me to pose for pictures, like specific poses, and he kept saying I was very photogenic and mature for my age. It felt, I don't know, it felt weird. My mom ended up cutting our visit short, and I never really understood why until I got older. I felt a flash of irritation, the automatic defensiveness that comes when someone you love is being criticized. Amanda, he was probably just being nice. Uncle David has always loved photography. It's his hobby. He's got albums full of family pictures going back decades. "Yeah, you're probably right," she said quickly, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. It was a long time ago. I'm probably remembering it wrong. But even as I reassured her, something cold settled in my stomach. I found myself thinking about Uncle David's photography hobby, trying to remember details I'd never paid attention to before. He did always have a camera at family gatherings, didn't he? He was the unofficial family historian, the one who documented every birthday, every holiday, every milestone of my life.
We all joked about Uncle David and his endless photo albums. I pushed the conversation with Amanda out of my mind, as much as I could. It felt disloyal to even consider her implications. This was Uncle David we were talking about. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike when Dad was too busy with work. The man who attended every school play, every graduation, every important moment of my life. The man who held me when I cried over my first broken heart and who gave me advice about everything from college majors to job interviews. But Amanda's words created a tiny crack in my certainty. And once that crack appeared, other memories began to seep through. November brought the third sign, though I almost missed it entirely. Emma called me on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual because she typically avoided phone calls in favor of texting. She was living in Eugene, finishing her master's degree in social work, and we usually communicated through a steady stream of memes and random observations throughout the day. "Hey, weird question," she said after we'd exchanged the usual pleasantries. "Do you remember Uncle David ever being, I don't know, inappropriate when we were kids?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. First Amanda, now Emma. What do you mean inappropriate? "I've been seeing a counselor," Emma said, and I could hear her choosing her words carefully. "We've been talking about childhood stuff, family dynamics, and some things have been coming up. Like, I remember Uncle David giving me these really long, weird hugs when I was in middle school, and he'd always want to take pictures of me, especially when I was in my pajamas or swimsuit. He'd say I was blossoming and that he wanted to document my transition into womanhood." I felt sick. "Emma, why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because it felt normal at the time," she said, her voice getting louder. "He was Uncle David. He was family. And it wasn't like he ever actually touched me inappropriately or anything. It was just the way he looked at me sometimes, the things he'd say, the pictures." The pictures. Always the pictures with Uncle David. My counselor says that grooming behavior often looks like special attention, like when someone makes you feel chosen, special, more mature than your peers. And I started thinking about how Uncle David always treated us like we were so much more interesting than other kids our age. I remember feeling angry at Emma then, angry at her counselor, angry at this whole conversation. So now having a close relationship with your uncle is automatically suspicious? Come on, Em. This is Uncle David we're talking about.
"I know," she said quietly. "Trust me, I know. I don't want to believe it either. But Sarah, I've been having these dreams lately. These really vivid dreams about things I'm not sure actually happened. And my counselor says that sometimes our subconscious remembers things our conscious mind has suppressed." "Dreams aren't evidence," I said firmly, "and therapists aren't detectives. Maybe you should find a new counselor if this one is making you question every positive relationship from your childhood." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe you're right," she finally said. "I hope you're right." But after we hung up, I found myself pacing around my apartment, my mind racing. 2 people in 2 months had brought up concerns about Uncle David. 2 people who had no connection to each other, no reason to coordinate their stories. Was it possible that there was something I'd missed, something I'd been too close to see? I started thinking about my own relationship with Uncle David, really examining it for the first time. He had always made me feel special, hadn't he? He'd tell me I was more mature than other kids my age, more thoughtful, more interesting. When I was 13 and going through an awkward phase, feeling invisible and unimportant, Uncle David had been the one to tell me I was beautiful, that I was going to break hearts someday. At the time, it had felt wonderful. In a household where Emma got most of the attention for being the baby, and where I often felt overlooked and ordinary, Uncle David's special attention had been like a lifeline. He'd seek me out at family gatherings, want to hear about my thoughts and feelings, treat me like my opinions mattered. But now, with Amanda and Emma's words echoing in my head, I found myself remembering moments that took on a different cast. The time when I was 14 and he'd walked on me changing clothes at Grandma's house, how he'd stood in the doorway just a beat too long before apologizing and backing out. The way he'd always volunteered to take me home from family gatherings, even when it was out of his way. The gifts he'd give me,
always slightly more expensive than what the other kids received, always chosen with careful attention to my specific interests. And yes, the pictures. So many pictures. Uncle David documenting every moment of my childhood and adolescence with his ever-present camera. Pictures of me at birthday parties, at Christmas morning, at family vacations. Pictures of me in my dance recital costumes, in my prom dress, in my graduation gown. Pictures of me swimming. Pictures of me sleeping on the couch during family gatherings. Pictures of me that I'd never asked for and had never really thought about. I started to wonder where all those pictures were now. Uncle David had albums and albums of family photos, meticulously organized and labeled. I'd always admired his dedication to preserving our family history. But now I found myself wondering what exactly he'd been preserving and why. Aunt Victoria's phone calls became more frequent and more pointed. She'd ask seemingly innocent questions about my childhood, about specific family gatherings, about my relationship with various family members. I started to suspect that Emma had talked to her, that maybe Victoria was conducting her own investigation into these concerns. Sarah, honey, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has David ever done anything to make you uncomfortable? Anything at all, no matter how small it might seem. I don't know, I found myself admitting. I mean, no, nothing obvious. But people have been asking me questions lately, and it's made me think about things differently. Why are you asking, Victoria? What's going on? There was a long pause. I can't talk about it over the phone, but Sarah, I need you to promise me something. At Christmas dinner, if I give you something, if I show you something, promise me you'll look at it, even if it's hard, even if it changes everything. Victoria, you're scaring me. Promise me, she insisted. Okay, I said, though I had no idea what I was agreeing to. I promise. The weeks leading up to Christmas passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. I threw myself into my work, trying to distract myself from the growing certainty that something terrible was about to be revealed. I bought Christmas gifts with mechanical efficiency, going through the motions of holiday preparation while my mind churned with possibilities I didn't want to consider. I found myself studying Uncle David during our few interactions that December, looking for signs of the predator that Amanda and Emma, and apparently Victoria, suspected him of being. But he seemed exactly the same as always, kind, gentle, interested in my life and well-being. When he helped me carry groceries up to my apartment one snowy Saturday afternoon, he was the same thoughtful man who'd been like a father to me my entire life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.